Okay, dear friends.
Be erased permanently.
Okay, friends, welcome to our international meeting of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Club Syndicate number 9 from Timisoara, Romania. Today we have a very interesting topic. The topic is about the science fiction and fantasy magazines in Europe, and we have some guests, international guests, of course, from Europe that will present the magazines from their country, which can be printed or online magazines. And I will read the presenters in the order of the presentation. And first of all, I am saying that I'm sorry if I can't pronounce well your names. So the first in line will be Lucie Lukacovicova. I don't know, please, Lucie, correct me.
Lucie Lukacovicova. Don't worry about it. It's a long and unusual name, even for Czech starts. So the Czech people have trouble with it.
Yes, for the first part, Luca is like my other name, Luca. I'm also Luca, so it's familiar. But after that, I was lost in translation. So after Lucie, it will be Nina Horvath from Austria, Marcin Klak from Poland, Antonija Meznaric from Croatia, Eva Vanco from Hungary, Veliko and Kalin from Bulgaria, and Cristian Vicol from Romania. So I will invite first to our presentation Lucie from Czech Republic, and after that we will hear Nina from Austria. The presentation will take no longer than 15 minutes, and after all the presentations are done, we will have the question and answer session with all the presenters. So please write down your questions as they come in your mind and prepare for the question and answer session. Thank you. Please, Lucie, have the microphone.
So, greetings. Basically, my input is not exactly a presentation, but more like a chat. I will tell you basics about Czech speculative fiction magazines. And hope you will be interested, and then we'll talk about it. So basically, Czech Republic has two main speculative fiction magazines. That is Pevnost, which means fortress, which is more oriented on LARP, history, and fantasy short stories, more in basically in fantasy direction. And then XB1, formerly Icarie. There was some trouble. The magazine nearly got shut down, and the previous owner didn't allow the crew to continue with the Icarie name. So they said, it's named after the movie Icarie XB1, a very old science fiction movie. So we can't be Icarie, so we will be XB1, bye-bye. And they continued with the second part of the name. They are more science fiction oriented, while Pevnost is more on the side of local authors, I would say. XB1 also has both local Czech authors and translations from abroad. Of course, translations via English, but not only from the Anglo-Saxon market. Of course, from there it is easy to get something, but they had something even from Asia, some also XB1 likes theoretical articles. For example, a study of Indians from science fiction from India. There was a long article, very nice one. Different things, and they are more into this direction. Both magazines are interested in science fiction and fantasy movies and books in general. So reviews are printed there. Both have websites, but if something has not changed drastically, only XB1 has some I would say articles on their website. Other articles than in the printed media. So the XB1 works a bit like both ways. So there are, of course, some other magazines which are online. Now a huge hit is Fantasy Mag SFF. Actually, I could write the names in the chat. The printed magazines are Pevnost and XB1. The only online is Fantasy Mag SFF. They have mainly articles, reviews. The say owner or the initiator, Mr. Hiemer, he wants to make it big. He really works for it, goes for it. They have many new articles each week, and yeah, there are many people visiting the site, so it's a huge boom. Then there is Fantasy Planet. Has a long tradition. There were also some short stories there. Some of my short stories were published there long time ago in a galaxy far away. And of course, they are still there because what's on the internet stays on the internet. And of course, now I would write them in another way, in a better way, of course. But Fantasy Planet did hold for long years, had some transformations of design. They also now go mainly for reviews and articles. And they cooperate with some publishing houses, so they have some interesting stuff. And the third one, which I will mention, is Sarden. This one also has a long tradition of many years. It's as old as Fantasy Planet, and I would say they have turned a bit more political, because the articles and interviews have gone slightly that way. They also go mainly for theoretical stuff, reviews, commentaries, not so much short stories or say direct art. Of course, we have many other smaller webs. Some of them interesting, rising, some of them on their decline. but the scene is alive and buzzing, I would say. That's the basic overview, because if somebody would be interested, of course I would be able in some time to put together a longer list of the smaller ones, but I don't want to throw a bunch of websites at you which would be of no use, or no interest for the moment. So that's all for the basic.
Thank you, Lucie. Now, Nina, would you start to present some magazines from Austria or Germany, please? Nina, we don't hear you, so
you're muted.
Now, do you hear me?
Yes, now you hear you. Okay.
Yes. Well, I was wondering if, by the way, I have the text chat open, so if anybody has a question, just type it in and I'm going to reply to it. And, well, probably some of you have seen the presentation of the SFF Awards, and my comment about the best fanzine in the presentation was, well, there has to be something of everything. And it's a magazine and it's very funny. It's called, I think it's the only real fanzine published now in Austria, and it's called Super Pulp, and it's horror and science fiction, and some of the stories in there drift into something the internet was made for, and I'm not talking about cats. There are two things the internet was made for. you know what I mean. And this is actually the only real fanzine in Austria. What we also do have is something very interesting, and it's a magazine called the Quaber Merkur, done by Franz Rottensteiner, and I would probably not call it so much a fanzine, so it started as one because the stuff is, rather scientific. It is rather a scientific approach to science fiction, and it's a time that has emerged in the early 60s and is ongoing. So you have to imagine that. And I was going through my piles all the afternoon, and I have infamous piles of all kinds of science, but as you know, always the stuff you're looking for is never found. That's some sort of Murphy's Law. If you're looking for a certain book or a certain magazine, you will never ever find it. So, and I have a quite personal connection to fanzines. I can show you those two. This was from 2002, and this was my first publication ever in a magazine called Sonderyear. It's a German one. Germans and Austrians share the same mother tongue, so it's obvious that a lot of Austrians are going to publish in Germany, which is the much bigger country. And so I'm also talking a bit. This is also an Austrian fanzine that ceased to exist. It's called Earth Rocks, and it was a very ambitious club, but it was, there were really high ambitions and expectations, but a lot of projects just end after a few years, and what what is, of course, a big drama, but the natural course of most things. And I can also show you what German, okay, I'm causing a big mess. What German signs may have in common is that they actually look like books. They actually, most signs look like books and mostly contain short stories. And actually nobody is doing this, you know, photocopying in the basement ever anymore. So people, of course, started like that. There were certain techniques which I don't know much about because I'm too young for it. But you know, you had a mechanic typewriter, and you had a sheet of paper and a sheet of charcoal paper and another sheet of paper and another sheet of charcoal paper and so on. And then, well, you were glad if you got the first copy because the last copy was hardly unreadable. But I just know those things by hearsay because this is not the modern style. The modern style is going to a printery and having something like this made. This is the magazine of the SFCD. This is Germany's biggest club. And it looks like that. It can also be downloaded for free. It also has a certain paper in, no, this is something else. A paper inside for club members only, and what could be, yes, I made a mess now because a lot of stuff is falling down. What could be interesting for the international people, this is a special issue on science fiction in Germany, and it's bilingual, English and German, and you can read about German fandom and stuff, and you usually get such things for free at the Eurocons. So what else? Well, this is also very nice. This is a magazine called Time Machine. It lately became more professional. These are made by Bavarian people, and they got a new publishing house, and it used to look like this, and it used to have a different name on each issue, what is a kind of odd idea, and the new publisher actually also didn't like it. So, well, what else? I think this is, you know, that I cannot tell you about every fanzine that exists or has ever existed, but it was just some sort of a personal review. You know, it was good going through my shelves and just being inspired a bit. So I think I'm done, basically done. It is that I should write down the publications. Yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in the text.
Thank you, Nina. I hope Marcin is back and he can start his presentation about magazines, science fiction and fantasy magazines in Poland. Please, Marcin.
Yes, I'm here. I hope you can hear me. And I hope you can see the presentation I'm sharing right now.
Yes, we see the presentation.
So, well, my name is Marcin. I'm blogging about fandom and conventions at fandomrover.com. And when Darius was asking me about the name of the presentation, I had issue with finding a good one. But I think that it is easier to publish online would be somehow a good summary of the situation in Poland. Probably not only in Poland, because it's really easier to publish online. As some short introduction or forward, over the years, a lot of different magazines were published in Poland, both professional magazines and fanzines, and it would be absolutely not possible to mention them all here. Like Nina said, for Austria and Germany, it's the same. What I wanted to mention, especially about the historical aspect, that even before we had any SFF magazine, some SF stories were being published in other magazines, like Młody Technik, meaning Young Technik, or Young Engineer, in fact, rather, which was publishing some of, well, relatively a lot of SF stories over the years. So this is what was before. And then I want to also mention that I will completely omit the magazines that were devoted to video games, to manga and anime and film, because there were a few in each category that were published and disappeared over the years from the market. Some of them came back and so on. So this is some introductory words. And now I would like to say, if we would need to mention just one magazine from Poland, these would be Fantastyka and Nowa Fantastyka. So during the communist time, started in 1982, there was a magazine called Fantastyka, and well, Fantastyka is a Polish word for speculative fiction. I believe that it is also being slightly used for internationally. At least in the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, it was mentioned, and I believe that few other languages also have words of more or less the same meaning and sounding exactly the same. After the communism period ended, there were some changes, in who would be the owner of the magazine and so on. And finally, the name was changed to Nowa Fantastyka, when Nowa means new. So it's the same magazine, but just new added in the beginning. So as you can see, it's almost 40 years old, and it's published monthly right now. I believe it's published monthly for most of its history or all of its history. Fantastyka contains both short stories and some articles. In each issue, they have short stories from Polish writers and also translated from other languages, mainly, of course, English, but not only English. And regarding the rest, they sometimes have, articles that are more interesting or less interesting, some reviews, some short summary of what has happened. So this kind of things. They are not limiting themselves only to literature. So usually there is some review of a comic book, some article about a film, and things like that. But I would say that the literature is quite important, especially considering that most of the magazine will be short stories and not the articles. And two more things. In 1983, Fantastyka at this time received the ESFS award for magazine, what was quite nice. And over the years, they had some child magazines that were created. Well, maybe not child is not the best word, but magazines that were in the same family. So firstly, it was Mała Fantastyka, meaning small or little Fantastyka, which was created for children. Then there was Comics Fantastyka, which was devoted to comic, of course. Then they had Fantastyka Wydanie Specjalne, meaning special edition. This one contained only short stories and no articles. It was published just once every 3 months. And then there was Czas Fantastyki, meaning the time of Fantastyka, which contained only articles and rather more complicated and more ambitious one. As you can see, all of those ceased to exist, and only the main magazine still remains with us. And then I need to look at time. Okay. Then if you would need to mention other things, there is Phoenix and Phoenix. And it started as a fanzine. As you can see, it was published in 1985 and 1986. And the name was finishing with KS. Then they stopped being published, and in 1990 they started to continue as professional magazine with the X as the last letter. And then again it died in 2001, and in 2018 it was reactivated as Phoenix Antologia, meaning Phoenix Anthology. And here it contained, it looked rather like a book. Maybe I can show it to you. It's even the same issue. So this is how it started to look, and it was not published very often at this time. And from L2, I have not seen the official closing of the magazine, but I believe that it is discontinued. However, you know, as the name goes, it's Phoenix, so I would not be surprised to learn that it will appear again for the 4th time on the market. So we will see this one. And then another magazine, and I think it's quite popular, well, happening relatively often in Poland, that magazine dies and then is introduced again. It's Sphinx. What of course, you know, is has double meaning, because Sphinx, of course, we know this statue, but it also starts with SF, so it's quite nice. It was established in 1994 and then died in 2003. Then in 2009, it was reactivated. However, it was published as a very cheap brochure, or even being available for free to the customers of certain bookshop, which was also the publisher and a bookshop. And then this year it came back to a more thick form and more magazine-like. And you can see this as a cover here, the bottom one. So far, only one issue like that is published. I have not yet read it, so we will see. But I think that at least it looks good, because this was what I was able to check. And the second issue should appear this or next month, I believe, and we will see. It's not widely available, because I believe it's available only on the publisher's website and on one eBay-like platform in Poland. So it's not available in normal distribution, but I hope that they will survive. So those 3 magazines, if I would be asked, you know, in the middle of the night to name 3, I would probably mention those. It doesn't mean that those are the Nova Fantastica is certainly the most important. As for the other 2, Phoenix and Sphinx, it will really depend on who you would ask whether they are really important or not. And then when we look at the current magazines, apart from 2 from those above that are still being issued, we have a few different ones. So we have iGloss, which is a Tolkien fanzine that is being published for quite a long time, not very often, but again, quite thick and interesting. They had 2 issues in English, but I'm not sure if they are available anymore. And this is published in paper. Then the older magazines I have listed here as published online, well, they are published online. And those include Essentia, which received the SFS Award for Best Magazine this year. And it's being published for 20 years, I believe. And they are not devoted only to science fiction and fantasy, but it's still quite important part of what they do. There is a Fahrenheit magazine. Creatio Fantastica is interesting one, because they have more, they are writing about articles about science fiction, but they are quite academic in what they do. So this is it. Hysteria magazine will be the one for the fans of horror. Then we have Silmaris, you can see it here at the bottom. They are also publishing some short stories and some reviews and interviews and so on. There are a few role-playing game zines being published recently, which is a new, well, we had a lot of zines before, but RPG zines were not very popular in recent years. Now they are coming back, so we will see. We have portals devoted to science fiction and fantasy or broader to pop culture. I listed a few here, but this is of course not a full list. Before we will go to the next slide, we have one role-playing game zine that is somewhere between current and discontinued. It was called Spotkania losowe, meaning random encounters. There were 4 issues published, the last one a few years ago, but we still hope that the 5th one will be published. So, so we will see. And then when I show you that quite a lot of things are being published online, right now we have a lot of magazines that are discontinued. And it would be impossible to mention all of them. So I'm just mentioning a few. One of them is science fiction, fantasy, horror, the one at the top, which is science fiction, fantasy, and horror. It was first called science fiction, and then the name was expanded. Then there was fantasy and science fiction. There was also the Polish edition. Then there was Magia i Miecz, meaning sword and sorcery. It was a magazine devoted to role-playing games, the professional one, published between 1993 and 2002. Very popular, but finally it died. Then it was reactivated in as you can see here, 2014, but it died again, and it was not as good, and there was some bad stuff happening around it, so that's not very cool. Well, they did a crowdfunding, and the last 2 issues that should be issued were not published, which is not nice, but well, that happens. Then there was very short-living Phantom, which didn't live for long, and there was a fanzine called Smokopolitan, published between 2015 and 2018, that also died. There is 1 issue available in English, and you can download it. I will give a link after I will finish. And when that's it, thank you for your time. I use the pictures from those websites listed here. And should you have any questions, just let me know. And yeah, that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcin. Very professional presentation, professional looking presentation. And now the next presenter will be Antonija from Croatia. Antonija?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Also, thank you guys for having me again.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
So my topic, I chose fandom in lockdown. I wanted to talk about our publishing during this pandemic situation. I'm going to talk about from my own perspective and experience. And I'm going to mention some of the projects that happened and are currently happening. But before we come to this 2020 year, just a short introduction. We currently have 2 magazines. So there's Ubik and Sirius B. Ubik is a magazine that publishes both fiction and non-fiction, and it specializes in local authors. So Croatians mostly, but also our neighbors from the countries who speak a language similar to ours, so we don't need to translate it. On the other hand, Sirius B is a magazine that publishes mostly international authors, and that's translated stories in Croatian, but we usually have an author or 2 from Croatia as well in there. Both of the magazine usually are live during twice a year. a period of time, but sometimes they get late because of the financial problems. But they aren't the only place where authors can publish their speculative fiction. We also have an annual collection of speculative fiction stories, and these collections are usually connected to conventions where they are distributed. This is, of course, not counting various fanzines and also solo authors collections and novels. So we have a lot of places where we can publish, but most of this are printed publications. Croatia is not really a good place for ebook publishing. Although I will mention that Sve na Crvenom trgu, this one furthermore left, is actually our first, I think, ebook that was primarily for speculative fiction collection of stories, rather than, you know, printed like the others. Why we don't do ebooks? And well, there are numerous reasons. First of all, the tax is ridiculously high on ebooks, much higher than on the print. So it's not really, the publishers don't find them profitable and interesting. There is also fear of of the piracy, then the idea that Croatians need to buy print because it's something real versus the ebook that's digital, or we see book buying as something, you know, that we need to have simply at home rather than the stories that are inside of them. So there's the idea that ebooks are not real books and that Croatians simply don't have it in them to read ebooks because majority of our reader base are older generations and there are not a lot of, you know, young people who read. So what's the point? So we really are mostly doing print, which kind of got into problems now this year when the, you know, pandemic broke out and we had lockdown like everyone else in the spring. That meant that everything came to a stop. There was no conventions, no cultural events, and etc. And I mean in live. We did have online conventions. Not all of our conventions went online. We have a lot of conventions, but only 5 happened online during the year, even after the lockdown. But, you know, when publishing is concerned, in this period of lockdown, there was a lull in the traditional publishing because it was simply not possible. Even with online convention, there wasn't an ebook version of collection of stories that they usually distribute print on their live collections. They simply decided to wait for the live convention to you know, publish the print version of their collections. There is also a problem that of funding, because usually it goes that the association or publisher who publishes these collections and magazines, they get money from the town, municipality, or country to print it. But you know, during the lockdown, our country got into really financial problems. So of course, a lot of things in culture simply started to lose funds. You know, so suddenly some of the associations lost their financial support to print these books, and I heard that some of them are simply postponed for the next year. And of course, everything was simply from the print side of the story pushed to the either next year or later this year. Although I did see that some of the collections did manage to get printed and published during the summer, but since there was no live collection conventions, that part of distribution wasn't still possible, regardless of that. So how did Fandom answer to this stop in publishing? Well, we had some I would like to first mention Sfera Association. They shared online some of their previously published works to be downloaded for free. So they shared their PDFs, but also they shared one new novel that still wasn't published, also for audience to read during the lockdown. And an interesting example was also that we had for the first time Sirius B in an ebook version. So that magazine I previously mentioned, named Sirius E. And I find this interesting because, well, the owner of this small press is notoriously, well, he went on the record to say that he's not interested in ebooks and digital publishing, but he also wanted to give something to the fandom while we were all at home. So he published an ebook free version, a magazine of Sirius E. Also, one interesting tidbit. I mentioned that in Croatia there's an idea that no one would be interested to reading, digital publishing because we're just too traditional. But when the lockdown hit, since I live with a librarian, I could see it with my own two eyes, but like literally everyone and their mothers and grandmothers suddenly called, looking for help with their application that our city library has for ebooks. So everyone wanted to read, and since there were no print, or better said, they couldn't go to the library and they couldn't buy anything, but they still wanted to read, so they asked for help, our librarians, to help them to read their, using their application for ebooks. So there will be interest still, even now when there are open again libraries and bookstores, because some of these people will not just forget that ebooks exist, and they will remember that, you know, it's maybe even easier for them than printed version. Anyway, during the lockdown, there wasn't so much traditional publishing, but a thing that happened almost immediately when the lockdown was put in place is that we had numerous similar projects happening all over the country that was called the Cameron, or some other versions of the Cameron. Those of you who listened to us on Futuricon knows that already we spoke a bit about it. But you know what was happening was that this wasn't a copycat sort of situation. Simply, people came to a similar conclusion. Since there's no print, we're going to publish online on blogs and websites and share it on social media. And because it was a scary situation, these projects were mostly made of solidarity and volunteer. And there wasn't much of, or none, money involved in them. I think at some point there were like 6 or 7 Decamerons in, or versions, or Decameron, or stories from the quarantine in the Croatia. The one that is important for our fandom is actually the one that I was involved with, Decameron 2020 Stories from the Quarantine. It wasn't exclusively for fandom or speculative fiction, but all 3 of us behind it were and still are con runners and speculative fiction writers. So of course we heavily promoted it with our friends and acquaintances, and it ended up being popular with both speculative fiction writers but also mainstream writers, and our audience was also diverse in both spheres. We ended up daily publishing for like 2 months, or in 45 days we managed to get like 142 stories from 118 different authors, and ended up publishing 52 stories. Majority of the stories are speculative fiction. So that's why we call it a success for our fandom, especially because a lot of these writers, well, we had those who are well known and have multiple awards and novels, but also those who are first newcomers. So I talked with a lot of them, and we were all a little bit, you know, frustrated with the situation when, since this traditional publishing was really in sort of a limbo. Nobody knew when the printed magazines and collections of stories are going to get published. We didn't know when the novels are going to get published. We didn't know if this is going to happen now in the winter of 2020, or it's going to be postponed into next year. So really, this was a place for our authors to, you know, write and publish immediately in the year when the traditional print publishing was really on the thin ice. And it was a huge success because also we were constantly, since it was published on blog, we could follow the statistics. So we saw that, you know, for the country that doesn't read much, there was suddenly a lot of readings. And yes, a lot of it, a lot of the success is connected with the fact that everyone was at home and bored, but also I find it very, very interesting that people didn't stop reading these stories. Even after the lockdown, we still have daily readings, unique visitors to the site. It's not stopping. Of course, numbers are much slower, but it's constantly moving. And during the summer, when we finally collected all of these published stories on the blog and put them as an ebook version, there was a lot of downloads too. So, you know, people wanted to read the ebook version as well, not just on the blog. Again, since there's so much in Croatia, this insidious idea that, you know, ebooks are not something that would be interesting to our readers. It was all very inspiring, you know, for our authors and us as the editors, and to know that there will be there's a possibility to distribute speculative fiction stories in other forms, not just the printed forms. Of course, this is not a new thing for other countries, and there are lots of famous Anglophone online magazines, but it is a new thing for, you know, Croatians. We're simply late as usual. In the end, of course, we do have now our magazines. I saw that Ubik last two numbers are finally published and in distribution again. So I know that it's not going to stop, and I'm really happy that we're going to continue to have printed magazines. And I hope that both Ubik and Sirius B will continue to be a part of our fandom. But I do hope that Hunger 7 will continue to publish Sirius E, of course, also, because I think that we really need to finally start using the digital publishing as well as the printed one, because it's just easier distribution and bigger accessibility. And really inspired by the Cameron, we started out a new online magazine in Croatia called Morina Kutija. Also, you could have seen a launch on Futuricon. This idea behind this is really maximum distribution in Croatia using the internet, and not just our local authors, but also international authors who write in English. So we currently have open submissions for stories, fiction and non-fiction. So if you have something, you think about it and give us a call. And that's from me.
Thank you very much, Antonija. It was a very insightful presentation about magazines and other publications in Croatia this time. Thank you again. Now it's time to welcome Eva from Hungary to talk about science fiction and fantasy magazines from Hungary. Eva, please. I confirm that we see your presentation.
Okay, it's nice to meet you, everyone, even if it's only virtually in this situation. I'm asked to talk about the Hungarian science fiction magazines, and I'm struggling with the presentation. Yes, from the beginning. And for the beginning, I have to talk a little bit about Galactica magazine, because even if Galactica started at even 50 years ago, it's still the dominant science fiction magazine in Hungary. And if we don't know the history of Galactica magazine, we cannot understand the whole situation of Hungarian science fiction and fantasy publication. So it's crucial to understand what is going on here and now. Galactica was established in 1972, and it was the first to familiarize the Hungarian readers with science fiction. It's really, really influential. Many people grow up reading Galactica magazine in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and Galactica mostly published short stories and part of novels and sometimes reviews, but mostly literature or fiction. And it was very important that the Galactica mainly published foreign authors and only very rarely contemporary Hungarian ones, and it almost never published beginners or amateurs. Usually, they asked renowned writers to give them stories, and there was a conflict in the Hungarian literature that there are the ones who work with Galactica, the writer ones, and there are the amateurs who has no place to publish their short stories. And this contradiction between the amateurs and the official science fiction literature in Hungary, it still exists because of the past of the Galactica in the 70s and 80s. The transition changed everything, even for Galactica, because its hegemony ended. It was easy to establish science fiction magazines after the transition in 1989, and there were dozens of new science fiction magazines established in the first 5 years, but almost all of them lived only for a year or less. So we have the experience that establishing a science fiction magazine is not a great business. It is always a failure after 5, 10, 11 issues. So it's our experience, and maybe that's the reason why there are only a few science fiction magazines in Hungary now. Even if, as you can see on the pictures, they were creative and diverse, but it wasn't enough for the Hungarian audience in the 90s. And now we arrived to today. Galactica was discontinued in 1995, and it was renewed in 2004. And now Galactica magazine is the biggest, and I could say Hungarian, only one Hungarian professional science fiction magazine. This is the one, we should say. It's published monthly. The number of copies decreased from 100,000, that was the number at the end of the 80s, to 1,000 or to a few thousand. So there are less readers than were before the transition, but the magazine is still quite popular. It's available everywhere. You can buy it in the bookstores, newsstands, gas stations, so literally everywhere. It still publishes short stories, mostly, and half of them is written by Hungarian authors, and the other half is by foreign authors. and it started to publish pop science and news as well to entertain the readers. The magazine won the European Science Fiction Society's award for the best magazine in 2005. It was right after its renewal. Trying to get back its readers, Science Fiction launched special issues as well. The Metagalactica is 2 times a year, and it's centered around one issue. For example, one Metagalactica is dedicated to Hungarian contemporary authors, or one is to the Strugatsky brothers. So it's a kind of thematical anthology published twice a year. And Hypergalactica is another publication of the Galactica magazine. It's for longer short stories or shorter novels. And it's especially for the subscribers. You cannot buy it in the bookstores or in the newsstands. It's the gift for the subscribers. We also have to mention SFF Műhely, which is not a magazine in the usual term. I would say it's a literary journal published by the Hungarian Writers Association's Department of Science Fiction and Fantasy. And in science fiction műhely, it's like, műhely means like a place where we work together in Hungarian. So the title means the place where we work together. And it is to publish theoretical work on science fiction, sometimes reviews on novels, but not fiction. As I said, Galactica is the only printed medium to publish fiction in Hungary. In the times of Galactica, there were no magazines or places for the amateur writers to publish. And now this is a new side of Hungarian science fiction magazines. Új Galaxis is especially for amateur writers. It's published by Eva Vanco Association, who also organize a yearly event, and they organize the biggest Hungarian science fiction award, the award of Zsoldos Péter, for almost 2 decades. They work like they have a literary competition, and the winners of this literary competition is going to be published in Új Galaxis. They publish 2 issues a year, and so it's more like an anthology than a magazine, but it can be both in bookstores and newsstands, so it's quite widely available. They changed their name in 1919 to SF Galaxy. It's practically is just a word. The editor changed the name of the magazine, but the structure remained the same. Interestingly, in the last few years, there were grassroots movements on the field of fantasy, horror, and weird fiction, but not on the field of science fiction. We have some magazines, partly published, partly printed, partly online, to publish mostly weird and horror fiction. The most important is Blackadder, as its name suggests. It's for Lovecraft fans. It's a Lovecraftian online magazine. But as far as I know, they have 4 or 5 issues printed. But these are not available in bookstores. You can order them on their website and receive it by post. So it's not so widely available. Liedert's Fény, it's like it's the same in a way. It's also for amateur writers, but it's for all genres of fantastic, but it's mostly horror, interestingly. So they accept all kinds of genres, but they publish mostly some kind of fantasy and mostly horror. And they also publish a kind of anthology 2 times a year, but I shouldn't call them a magazine. So the publishing possibilities for amateurs are still limited in Hungary now. And interestingly, we have no fanzines in Hungary, almost not at all. I couldn't mention even one. And we have not, or only a very, very few online magazines. I don't have the official explanation for the lack of the online magazines. I have some ideas, but this is my personal opinion. First, that we had a really bad experience in the 90s, that it's financially a disaster to launch a science fiction magazine, even online. So people don't trust to try it. They don't dare to try it. And the atmosphere in Hungarian science fiction is full of conflicts between different groups. And if someone launches an online magazine or something, there will be hundreds of critics and criticizers in a few hours. So it's not, in this atmosphere, it's not easy to start something new. It's not motivating to launch an online magazine, for example, even if it needs less funding than a published magazine. Maybe for that reason, our science fiction websites are not for fiction. They are for film and television and series reviews and news and stuff like that. But these are quite popular. You can see on the presentation the biggest ones: sfportal.hu, SF Mag, Science Fiction.hu is run by the mentioned Havana Association. It mostly contains news from the field of Hungarian science fiction. Spekulativzona.blog.hu is very interesting because it's run by one single person, a fanatic science fiction fan, I would say, and the arch enemy of Galactica magazine, who dedicated his blog to book reviews and news from the field of science fiction. And E-Kultura is the last important science fiction website in Hungary, which is especially dedicated to book reviews. That's all that they have. It's also interesting that we don't have fantasy sites. We haven't any fantasy magazines in Hungary. And we have only a few fantasy sites. For example, as you can see, fantasyport.extra.hu or Fantasy Centrum, but they mostly provide publishing opportunity to amateurs and to have chats and discussions on series and movies. So practically they are not working like a magazine. They are not publishing regularly fiction on their sites. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I'm very happy to answer everything. I tried to keep it short to be in the time limit, but I'm glad to answer all your questions after the last presentation.
Thank you, Eva. It was a very interesting presentation, very interesting scene in Hungary for magazines. It was very instructive. And now we are inviting two friends from Bulgaria, Veliko and Kalin, to present some magazines from Bulgaria. Please.
Hello, friends. I hope you hear me well.
Yes. And we see you very well.
Good. I am Veliko and this is Kalin. And just so you know what we're talking about, first I'm going to quickly show you the Almanac Fantasticus latest edition. This is the 2019-2020 10th anniversary edition, over 400 pages in color as well. The almanac is in Bulgarian only, just like all the other editions before it. It's obviously a huge volume of work that has been iterated on a lot over the years. So I'm going to try to answer the question of how did they start? Its creator, Antonija Meznaric, has dreamt of this kind of work as early as 1980, the year, not the decade, when he and other like-minded people have put together the earliest anthologies presenting young Bulgarian science fiction writers. Over the years, his vision of this almanac slowly coalesced into specifics as he worked on other periodicals until the first edition of the almanac finally happened in 2008. This is official info, although I do see on the cover of this almanac that there is a 2007 edition, but maybe it's somehow incomplete. Kalin will be able to fill in details later.
Well, actually, it was published in 2008, even though it says 2007 on the first cover.
Okay. So maybe you have noticed the unconventional B alphabet title of the almanac. The first half is in Cyrillic. Well, it's probably inverted here, but yeah, the first half is in Cyrillic and the second half is in Latin alphabet. This is to show that the almanac showcases speculative fiction ideally from all over the planet, by pens writing in both the Cyrillic and the Roman alphabet.
We are looking to expand into hieroglyphs too.
Eventually, at least. The translations come from members of the Fantasia Translation Academy, whose primary mission is to translate Bulgarian science fiction writers into full-fledged English and present them to the world side by side with their international colleagues.
Actually, I am going to talk when Veliko is done about the English translations from the almanac that you can read. I'm going to put a link in the chat.
The translators read the pieces presented, they help select the appropriate pieces, edit and polish them. Likewise for Russian or any other science fiction piece is welcome in the almanac on the same footing as science fiction in English. The translations do not focus on bestsellers only. The almanac is a territory of humaneness for the same reason that we have named our foundation the Human Library. We believe that science fiction is the tool best suited to reflect the ever-changing humane aspect. Therefore, we publish speculative fiction of all kinds and by all peoples, so long as it's looking for humaneness. Bulgarian SF writers are generously represented in texts that have already stood the test of time, as well as in debuts. However, all the pieces are original, bearing the mark of their authors, their styles, and their settings. In the issues of Fantastica, we have a section called Fantastology, which aims to give us better insights into speculative fiction. Reviews of works published around the world offer a bird's-eye view of the planet Fantastica. We also do not limit ourselves to literature. We cover science fiction cinema and TV shows, which have become dominant in visual culture nowadays, as well as fine arts and illustrations, video games, LARP even, music. We approach the subjects with a critical eye, as well as being open to new inspirations. The fandom section of the almanac presents the world of science fiction authors, professional and amateur alike. There are presentations about meetings, conventions, and clubs in Bulgaria, as well as around the world, though that would be mostly the close by Balkans. Still.
No, it's everywhere.
At least that was my impression.
We have translated accounts of WorldCons, Eurocons, and so on.
There's also articles on various fanzines and the first publications of now-accomplished writers. We believe that the Futurum section of the almanac is much needed. Contemporary science fiction has not divorced itself from the future. Our popular science articles capture the advent of the new.
Basically, we have a section in the almanac which is devoted to science. It's called, I will use the Latin pronunciation, Futurum.
And finally, there is a signpost above each issue of the almanac, and I'm going to quote it now because it's important. It says that Fantastica is for those of us who have been cultivating passionate minds and wise hearts.
Probably that's the most important thing that distinguishes this particular magazine from everything else in Bulgaria. It's very much devoted to the value of constructive and positive science fiction, fantasy. There is barely any horror in our almanac because we haven't yet found constructive and positive horror, but we are open to it. So somebody may still surprise us. Just as the Human Library, we are a volunteer community of readers, writers, translators, and artists. The almanac is based on promoting this idea of looking how a future can come that we actually want to live in, rather than all the futures that we don't want to live in, like dystopias and post-apocalyptic versions of the future. So if you are looking for that kind of optimistic and constructive SF, the almanac, you'll probably like the almanac. Now, as I said earlier, we have translated some of the stories in the almanac into English. We've been sending them around the world to various magazines for 15 years already. And this year, finally, we compiled an anthology. It's called Fantastica Almanac, which collects the best of them. It also showcases excerpts from some Bulgarian novels. So if you want to read it, it's available as a preview version, for the time being a PDF file. Besides the stories, it also features about 100 pages of full color art or black and white drawings. For the time being, while we are still looking for an agent or a publisher who will be interested in representing the anthology officially, you can get the preview version either for free or you can donate as much as you want. Basically, we are using this model of pay as you will. We do it for all our books in Bulgarian too. I mean the electronic versions of our books. Because Antonija talked about the situation in Croatia, it's a bit similar here in Bulgaria, but we started doing electronic books about 7 or 8 years ago. Only this year did we publish the almanac as an electronic book. We basically, when the quarantine started, we published all, well, not all 10 issues, but 7 of them at the same time, so that people can have something to read while they're isolated in their homes. It was pretty successful. Actually, the greatest success was when our national railway company, who is running a campaign, Read in the Train, got the electronic versions and added them to their library. So passengers on trains can download it and read it for free. The almanac is just one example of magazines and fanzines in Bulgaria. Right now we have probably about another half a dozen fanzines. We don't have any professional magazines anymore. And we have about half a dozen websites which are quite active in discussing and promoting speculative fiction, but we wanted to give you a very focused insight into one particular edition. Also because you can actually read some of the stories in English. Most of the other fanzines and e-zines don't have any translations in English, so they're aimed at Bulgarians. I don't think there's anything that we should add at this stage. We are open to questions. So there was a question by Lona a bit earlier, and I'll take the opportunity to answer it right away. Our almanac for the past 3 years has run a competition called The Advent of the New, or something like that, for short stories that are positive and constructive. Not only speculative fiction short stories, we also accept mainstream writing, historical writing, whatever, as long as it features characters who will inspire us to build this brighter future. So yeah, that's one way we get amateur writers involved. And I think that each and every of our fanzines accept well, the ones that are not just reviews, of course, but the ones that have fiction, they accept submissions most of the time from everybody. As Nina said, she has had one of her stories, or I don't know, you know, just one of your stories or more of your stories published in our fanzines. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Veliko and Kalin. And now, for the last presentation, we will have Cristian, who will talk about 2 magazines in Romania. Please, Cristian.
Hi, everyone. So glad to meet you. Yes, I will talk about, well, one magazine which is currently being published at, it should tomorrow or maybe Sunday, its 11th issue should be published, and one which will be shortly published in a short time period be published. So I'm quite fascinated by the fact that all of you talked so generously about the history of publications and what is currently published in your countries. And I have to confess that it's quite amazing that so many publications are currently being still published or in print, which is quite amazing because in Romania, there aren't that many. I would say there were, maybe not at the same time, all of them at the same time, but if you add them up, there are quite a big number. And before I start the presentation about the 2 publications I want to talk about, I should mention those which are currently in print or are being published, well, not by us here, the people here in the chat that are from Romania, but they have, let's say, maybe consistent apparitions and have a decent quality. Helion magazine, which is one of the oldest, SFF, so it's an acronym, CSF, which means the Science Fiction Collection, Colecția pentru Science Fiction. Vulturul, the Eagle, quite a weird name, but it you know, once in a while it lands with a new issue. What else? Zin, which comes from fanzine, but it's just Zin and it's in print, which is quite okay. And maybe a number of others, and some of them which don't, Utopica, Liternautica, so there are quite a number of them, and most of them well represented, usually by clubs like ours. So that being said, I will continue with the presentation I wanted to start with. So maybe some of you have seen me at Futuricon, then I was upside down, now I'm not anymore, which, you know, is quite nice because I'm not gonna start hallucinating anytime soon. Anyway, I have to share a screen a bit because I have some covers which are from the same magazine, but they're quite nice. So maybe you want to see them. Let's see, how the hell do I do this? Desktop, how can I share the desktop? Maybe like this, you'll see YouTube. Okay, Romanian movie, quite a fancy Romanian movie. Okay, I'm not sure. Can you see?
Yes, we
the
can
cover?
see. You
Okay.
we know we can see only YouTube. So you
Only
selected
YouTube. God damn
you
it.
selected the YouTube
Okay.
window.
I've selected the YouTube window. Okay, I will deselect the YouTube window and try to do this again. How? Okay, lucruri, maybe. Okay, here. Can you see it now?
Yes, that's right. It's good.
Okay, if I change it, do you see another one, or is it the
Yes,
same
yes, I
one?
confirm
Okay.
it's okay.
Okay, awesome. With that confirmation said, I'm here to talk about this magazine and another one, but I will start with this first. It's called Galaxia 42, Galaxy 42. I think I've talked about it at Futuricon, so for those of you who were there, you probably heard me talking then and know some details about it. So it's quite a new magazine. It appeared last year, and the first issue was in December. So we're at our 11th now. It should appear soon. And I would say it's probably, and for those of you who will listen from well, not now, but later on, I would say it's probably one of the best right now in Romania. Because there are certain aspects which make it so good. One is the number of people who are currently reading it. And we gather quite a decent number of people which on a monthly basis are interested in accessing the link. Marius, if you could post the link, that would be helpful for those of you who want to go on the website. And we started this magazine trying to, it's sort of a collaboration between translators, writers, different editors of other magazines which had the experience, trying to sort of make it a national collaboration. And we actually managed to do that. The matter of fact is that I'm not sure why I'm presenting this magazine, because the two main editors are currently in chat and are listening to me, and maybe I'm the least qualified person to talk about it, but I will nonetheless. It's Daniel Timariu and Alexandru Lamba, they're the main editors. We grew on a monthly basis. We grew as visitors are concerned and as authors that we managed to publish. You can see I started with this one because we had, this was a special issue. We sort of do that once in a while. We take a theme from the sci-fi and fantasy genre, and we try to, you know, exclusively dedicated to some sort of genre from the larger genre of science fiction and fantasy. And this was a dark issue. And as you can see, we managed to get Stephen King to give us one of his stories, which was previously unpublished in Romania, and that was awesome. I think it's something to be noticed and to be proud of. And other different good authors which won prizes like the Nebula Award or the Hugo Award, like Alaya Dawn Johnson or you know, others. And but at the same time, because we have translations each month, we try to promote Romanian authors as well. And I will, so another cover, because we sort of consider this to be that sort of magazine where we promote Romanian science fiction and fantasy literature, and we try to do our best to publish only quality articles and quality literature and quality reviews and essays on different topics, because it's sort of an all-encompassing science fiction and fantasy genre related, because we have short stories, we have novels being published in periodics, Alexandru Maniu, which is with us, has exquisite, I would say, essays on different topics which are relatable right now, like the plague, or you know, I know one of the best I've read in recent issues is one about the death of expertise, which sort of concerns us, and concerns us not only as you know, trying to relate everything that is happening around us, but also when it comes to trying to publish fantasy and science fiction publications, and the authority we can propose us that we have. We also have a science column, which is actually most of the time is written by, he's a doctor in genetics, so we uphold him as being actually relevant, and never try to you know, say that he's not right, because he's a doctor in genetics. We try as well to get illustrations. Some of these are made by me, the not so good looking ones. So basically the good looking ones are from you know, actual artists which do this for a living. So this is one of it, and one of those illustrations, and it's quite excellent, I would say. Yes. So this one as well, this is in a more naive fashion. We also have, because I have to mention the people, at least the people who are in chat with us now. Darius Hupov, he is a member of the team, and he is he's concerning himself with all the foreign relations we want to have and we want to cultivate at this magazine. We're not trying to just be a Romanian fanzine. And you probably know him. He has connections by now with most fandoms in Europe, and he's doing a hell of a job. He even managed to translate, to get Romanian authors to be translated in foreign countries, which is quite excellent. I think this is what we're all striving as authors. This is a very orange illustration. It was the summer edition we had, and it seemed like appropriate to do it. Then who else? And Marius Gordan, you know him. He's the one who mostly called you here. He is our video game person contact. He is a gamer. He's an absolute nuthead when it comes to video games, and he knows a lot about that genre and that niche. And he's writing about video games in a very video game-ish manner, trying to establish a connection to that community, because in the end, this is what we're trying to do. With this magazine, we're trying to build communities around us, and trying to, you know, get to the core of what science fiction actually is, and who are the people who like science fiction and love science fiction. And I think this is an issue concerning all of your publications, which you have aforementioned, because there are so many people doing so many things out there, like cosplay and LARP and I don't know, video gaming and board gaming and painting miniatures, and it's sort of hard to have contact with all those people and make a monthly publication, monthly magazine, which can encompass all of that. But we're trying. This is going to be, it's not finished, I think, because the colorist is missing, but this is going to be the this month's issue, which hasn't been published yet. It's an awesome illustration by Victor Drujini, which is a guy which worked at Marvel and DC and Dark Horse, so he is quite talented. This was our first issue, the fantasy one. We started with the fantasy edition, Faceless Woman. some planet being blown up. And yes, this is, I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. So there's a lot of other people involved, another writers, you know, Alexandru Lamba, which is one of the head editors, and he's getting foreign texts, and he's talking to authors, and he's writing reviews, and basically we're all doing not only just one article or one, we're trying to encompass everything, and we're it's a tough job, I would say. Daniel Timariu as well, being he's part of the IT crew, which is just him. So he's the IT crew, and he's the chief of the IT crew. You know, he's again establishing connections with all the aspects of the fandom, and different other people, which you can find. And also we have an English section in the magazine, so you are very welcome to enter that and read it. And now for the last part of my presentation, we're trying, and we will soon enough, publish a new magazine, which is called, well, this is called Planul 9, because it's in Romanian, but it's in English, it would be Plan 9. Now, for those who are very pop cultured and pulp fictioned, Plan 9 from Outer Space is a famous 50s movie, pulp fiction movie, produced by Ed Wood, a famous sci-fi director, which is considered one of the worst science fiction movies ever made, and that makes it so special and so wonderful. My dog is gagging and puking. Hey, okay. And this, it's part of the team from Galaxy 42 is going to work here. But they're going to be two different separated publications. And we're trying, because Galaxy 42 has this sort of serious and all-encompassing and, you know, allure of a magazine. This is going to be a bit more playful, because we wanted to go hard on the niche of pop culture and pulp fiction, which is, we love it so much. And we're gonna try and write about, you know, B movies and cosplay and LARPing and building miniatures and figurines and publishing authors which haven't been already published in the fandom. So people which write science fiction or close to science fiction, that haven't been published yet in let's call it the mainstream science fiction and fantasy magazines. And it's going to be, strictly speaking, the magazine of this club, which you are participating right now. And we're going to try and make it as playful as possible. And we're going to have an English section as well. So you are all invited. Now, I will extend this invitation because it's going to be the magazine of the Syndicate 9 Club. I will extend an invitation because we want to publish materials which are presented in the club as well. So please, if you want to send us the materials you've read today, or send us short stories, articles about your science fiction in your country, anything interesting, and most of all, anything which is, you know, pop culture-ish, please do so, because we are in need of a lot of material. Now, because, and maybe we will have a discussion afterwards, if most of the people who are here are part of the team of this Plan 9 magazine. And maybe they want to say something or add something, because me not preparing anything other than just ad-libbing it, I've probably made, well, I've mostly forgot people to mention and thank and introduce or present to you, or other plans that that we have. So I think I've talked too much. I'm not sure if Darius agrees. Can I talk anymore? Can I?
Yes, you are the last one, so you can extend your talk if you have
I don't
something important to say.
I don't want to extend my talk. It's the privilege of being lost and also the curse of it, because I can talk indefinitely, but people are tired and, you know, maybe not in the mood anymore. But yeah, these are the two magazines that the people in this club and part at Galaxy 42, part of the team is with team members from Syndicate 9, and Plan 9 is going to be an exclusive magazine of Syndicate 9, which we want to sort of, using both of them, we want to try to encompass both of, you know, the manifestations, let's call it like that, of science fiction and fantasy today, which is the sort of serious one, where we deal, you know, in the serious part of science fiction, in that sort of a manner, you know, that sort of an approach. And then Plan 9, which is, you know, we're trying not to take ourselves not too serious while doing it, because we want to be professional about it. And, you know, have a lot of jokes, a lot of gags, a lot of references, and sort of go towards those places which in Eastern Europe, as much as you know, we know it as much as you know it, sort of that part of Western science fiction which is popular today is still something new, like board games and video games and LARPing and cosplaying and you know, sort of Warhammer 40K sort of stuff. So yeah, this is about it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll all have questions for me and for each other after I'm done. So I'm done now.